The Super Nintendo had about 714 licensed games in the US, and 63 of those started with the word Super. That's almost 9% of the entire US library for Super Nintendo games being Super something or other. How are you feeling? You got John Riggs here. I'm an old school gamer. Thank you for subscribing. Love doing videos like this, just for fun. Starting off with a personal favorite, Super Adventure Island. That's right, Master Higgins back at it once again. We've had so many Monster World collaborations, compilations. Where's my Adventure Island compilation? I would love to see that. And Super Adventure Island, it's a linear experience, this one. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, as you go through these stages, pick up your upgrades. A lot like the NES version. In fact, your how many players you have left here, that's very Nintendo graphics right there on a Super Nintendo. Love the soundtrack to this one, too. And then later on, a few years later, we get Super Adventure Island 2, and this one is more of an exploration. This one's a little bit more like that Monster World style, where you're kind of going around in an open world to play this game here. A little bit like Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, where as you're going along, you run into an enemy, and then it turns into a little bit of a side-scrolling little bit stage to defeat these enemies to move through the stage. Man, what a cool idea. I wish this game would have come out earlier in the Super Nintendo life cycle, but glad it came out all the same. Super Alfred Chicken. Now, of all games, I mostly played Alfred Chicken on the NES, because I was going for the whole NES set a while back. And Super Alfred Chicken, well, is a game I completely skipped. I missed it completely, but it still plays like that NES version. Super European on this one, and I don't need to tell you, you already know what I'm saying, when you can just tell when a game came out in Europe, or a game was developed in Europe, like in European countries, by the items you're collecting, how everything looks, how everything feels, kind of floaty with the graphics, a little, bubbly with the graphics and the colors and everything. It's not a terrible game, but boy, it's something. Hey, speaking of that, we have Super Aquatic Games starring the Aquabats. This is a James Pond game, but it plays more like a track and field where you have to like mash the buttons to get through these stages and stuff like that too. A very Olympics style, again with that European style. You know what else is super? This arcade-scented air freshener. It smells like menthol cigarettes, wood paneling, spilt Coke, used gum. I make custom air fresheners. I also sell my home brews. You can check out a link in the description below. Huge support for the channel. Thank you so much. Super Baseball Simulator 1000. Now, the baseball video games are usually pretty decent. This one's the best of the best because this one has a feature where you can do like upgraded super moves where you're like throwing fireballs, or you can hit the ball, the ball turns into a leaf, things like that. Certain things you can do. You can also just play this game traditionally too, but what's the fun of that? Hey, speaking of traditional, we have Super Bases Loaded. Super Bases Loaded has that weird perspective. Thank you with the Mote 7 and the angles and all that. I appreciate that. But it just is, when the baseball games have this other angle that's not the traditional video game angle, I'm always thrown off. You will get that, however, with Super Bases Loaded 2. And Super Bases Loaded 2 actually is a pretty decent baseball game. Now, this is my favorite of the three because there are three of them. In fact, we can also just go ahead and cover Super Bases Loaded 3 while we're at it. Licensed to Steal. Yeah, this game you can actually play as like the licensed teams and everything like that too. So here I am with my Mariners and all that, and it's another baseball game. It has this behind the thing. This is that bases loaded view, but then the overhead is that traditional diamond. So very cool. Oh, what's up with all the baseball games? Super Batter Up is the next game we have here. Well, this is going to be another traditional style baseball game. Again, very traditional. However, you can play as licensed teams, and those licensed teams do have the licensed characters. And they even have a little bit of their mannerisms. Not as deep at their mannerisms, but how like King Griffey Jr. holds the baseball bat. Okay, that's actually kind of fun. Super Battleship. Now, I was a huge fan of Battleship, the board game, when I was growing up. And Battleship for the NES, very cool. Super Battleship, well, there's a couple of modes on here. One of them is not your traditional Battleship game, but it's totally Battleship. As I move, then you move, then I move, then you move, and then eventually you get to a point where you can try to destroy their battleship in a very video game way of doing it. And if that's not really your thing, you're just like, no, I just like the traditional Battleship. That's fine. They have that mode on here too, so very cool. Classic Battleship is also on Super Battleship. Oh no, this is super cool. I like this graphic here. Super Battle Tank 2. Now, they didn't have a first one on the Super Nintendo, but let's go ahead and go straight to the sequel. That's how you know it's going to be awesome. Now, I believe Super Battle Tank was on the NES, so now you have the Super Nintendo version. This is where the sequel comes in. And you control this tank in a kind of tank simulation way. Well, after all this action, it's time to get a little relaxation in, and that's where Super Black Bass comes into play. A lot of people love their fishing games, and I love the concept of a fishing game. Now, I've never been a fisher. I've always been the grasshopper. I've always entertained for my meal. Never been quite the hunter or gatherer or fisher or anything like that too. Been fishing once in my life, literally one time. Had a good time. Not really my thing. But fishing video games? These can be super relaxing, super chill. These were the cozy games we had before cozy gaming was a thing. And Super Black Bass way up the list. Super Bomberman. Now, when it comes to cozy gaming... No, I'm just kidding. Super Bomberman, you're blowing stuff up. Now, this is your traditional Bomberman style of game. With a little bit of a story mode, so you're still like going through the levels, but in this Bomberman form. This is the first one. This is Super Bomberman proper, you know, Super Bomberman 1, I suppose you could call it. And then we did get Super Bomberman 2, which had a little bit more going on for the story when you do the individual levels, defeat the enemies, move through the doors and all that too. We had 2 of them. In Japan, they had 5 of them. But we'll take the 2, and we will appreciate that. And you can also get that multiplayer tab, too, to play 4-player Bomberman. Very cool for the Super Nintendo back in the day. We also had Super Bonk on the Super Nintendo. Now, I always associate Bonk's Adventure with the TurboGrafx 16. They did have Bonk's Adventure on the Game Boy. They did have it on the NES. But Super Bonk, super fun. Love, love, love this game. And they also had the sequel that came out in Japan. We didn't get that one here either. I'm not talking about the Japanese games today, though, so just showcasing briefly that this was one of those super games on the Super Nintendo, and it was Super Bonk. And what a super game it is. We also had Super Bowling. As generic of a name Super Bowling is, it is a super fun, made by Technos, bowling video game on your Super Nintendo. Super, super fun. And I was talking about it just briefly recently, where the bowling genre of video games have traditionally been very, very good. They've always been totally worth playing. And this one, no exception. Super Bowling for the Super Nintendo. Super fun. We had Super Buster Brothers. This was known by another game, Paying something or other, I don't remember. I've always known this game as Super Buster Brothers. I remember playing this in the arcade at my dentist, of all places. This is just, what a fun idea for a game. You know, you have to shoot your little grappling hooks, and then that's what pops the balls, and then like asteroids, you shoot one, the bigger one splits into 2, they split into smaller ones, you can pick up, you know, different upgrades and items along the way too. Super Buster Brothers, still a fun game today. Super Caesar's Palace, this is the game that your mom probably played on the Super Nintendo. Well, it's a gambling game without using real money. You can talk to people, I suppose, and hey, you know what, let's just put it all on there and hey, I won, cool. I better quit while I'm ahead. It's not just Castlevania IV, it's Super Castlevania IV. Now, this game isn't as Castlevania-y, let's say, as going from Castlevania 3 to Castlevania Bloodlines. I think Bloodlines on the Genesis is more like Castlevania, but I'm here to say, it ain't better. Super Castlevania IV, one of my absolute favorite Super Nintendo games. Just the graphics, the colors, the sound, the fact that you could like let your whip hang and whip it around and stuff like that too. The mechanics of this game. Love, love, love this game. And they could have just called it Castlevania IV, but because it's on the Super Nintendo, let's call it Super Castlevania IV. Also had Super Chase HQ. There have been several Chase HQ video games along the way. This is for the Super Nintendo, so that's why it's Super Chase HQ. Out of all the Chase HQ games, not my favorite version of this game is on the Super Nintendo. I think it's a little bit choppier than it needs to be for a racing game, for a driving game. It's not a racing game because you drive, and then you find the enemy. There's actually like, you have to defeat the enemy by crashing into it and stuff. So I love that. I love that version of it. I love that about this game. Super Nintendo version, again, not my favorite port of Chase HQ, but you know, definitely worth looking at all the same. Super Conflict was a game I remember seeing the box art for specifically, saying, look at that box art, I wonder what that guy's doing now. And it was a game I've always passed up on, but I could tell what kind of game it was just by looking at the back of the box, and I was actually gifted this game recently at a convention, saying, oh, it was a favorite of ours, and we want you to check it out too. I did play a lot of Military Madness for the TurboGrafx 16, and this is that strategy-style game where you can move your people, you can move closer, then you can defeat the other people by, you know, us versus them, depending on who you are, or what you know, your tank versus the people, or, you know, the leverage that you might have over the other person too. You know, pretty cool. Super Double Dragon, we finally get a Super Double Dragon. I do love me some Double Dragon, and this is the Super version of it. Out of all the Double Dragon games, I do like this game, but man, it is, I wish it was moving at like 1.5 times faster than it does. It's just a little bit of a slower paced fighting game, but I love the fact that you have your punch and kick and jump buttons, and then your fourth button is block, but if they're throwing a punch, you can catch their punch, and then you can, you know, attack them back while you're still having them in an arm lock and stuff like that. I thought that was really, really cool. I love that mechanic about this game. And always more fun as a two-player experience. Of course it is, because that's how you should be playing Double Dragon. It's not called Single Dragon. Super Ghouls and Ghosts. I always have to pause for a moment, because it's like, is it Super Ghosts and Goblins? Because to me, it should be Super Ghosts and Goblins. There's Ghosts and Goblins, Ghouls and Ghosts, that was the Mega Drive version, and then Super Ghouls and Ghosts. I wish it was Super Ghosts and Goblins, doesn't matter. It's super awesome, amazing game is what this game is. One of the original, I hate to say roguelike, roguelite, rogue whatever, because you do not know what weapon you're going to get. And depending on if you get your favorite weapon, or if you get a weapon that you don't really care for at the beginning of the game, then it's like, that also depends on how far you're going to get earlier on in the game. You know, the weapons change it up, you know, depending on how you know, from whatever, or, you know, when you get the chests unlocked. Different forms of armor will give you upgraded, or you can do, like, you know, charged up moves and stuff like that too. I did love me some Super Ghouls and Ghosts. A huge look at what the Super Nintendo could do with graphics and sound, and the snowing scene when like all the snowflakes were falling and all that too. So the Mode 7 that they used in this game, very, very good game. Super G2, well, it's Super Goal 2. It's like, don't put the, I see, the O is the ball, but they put the 2 over that, and it's like, no, don't confuse me. It's Super Goal 2, and it shouldn't be that confusing, really. Not really Premier League type stuff, so you're playing like country versus country. Okay, I get it. And it's a soccer game. I mean, it's the #1 sport in the world. I know here in the United States it's all about baseball, basketball, football. Football probably being the #1, you know, I would think, as far as, like, you know, advertising goes. But you know, soccer is still very, very good. And again, globally, it's #1. So gotta keep on pumping out these soccer games. And this is not the last time you'll see a soccer game on this list. I promise you that. Super Godzilla. I promise you, this is the last time you'll see a Godzilla game. Not that it matters, really. Super Godzilla. Hey, you know what? You get to control Godzilla walking down the street and crushing tanks and stuff like that. You can't go wrong there. Good old Godzilla. I wish it played more like the NES version, the first one. A lot of Godzilla games are like the strategy, tactical-based games. Give me that first one, where you're just like whipping your tail and breathing radioactive whatever. Yeah, give me that. Give me that version of Godzilla. That's what I want. Super High Impact. This is a football game. Very good that it looked like, not exactly like Tecmo Bowl, but it was that left to right moving for Tecmo Bowl, or for a football game, because I liked that mode of it. Oftentimes football games are you're charging up or down the field instead of left and right, but I liked this version of it, so I thought it was pretty cool. Super James Pond. We saw a James Pond in that Aquatic games earlier, and this is Super James Pond. First played James Pond on the Genesis, or your Mega Drive if you're in the UK, and this is the Super Nintendo version of that. Very neat, very cool. I mean, again, European style, but I mean, I don't know, I kind of liked it. It was worth a rental. Super Mario World, you ever heard of this one? Well, this is the pack-in. This is the one that came with the console. Props to you if you have this game boxed, because it did not come boxed when you bought the console. You actually had to pay for it separately, and that's why the box version is going for a pretty penny to collectors. I do not have one. I do not need one. But this is Super Mario World. This is the one that started it all. I love the little intro that tells you exactly what this game's all about. the introduction of Yoshi in this game, the introduction of other enemies in this game as well. We also had Super Mario All-Stars, which is one of the first remake collections of games that had Mario's 1, 2, and 3, as well as Lost World, which was the Super Mario 2 in Japan that we didn't get at the time, but our first time playing it here in the US. My story behind this game was I visited my friend's dad who lived in San Francisco back in when did this game come out? 93 or something like that? When this game came out, and so in going to San Francisco for a week with my friend's dad who lived in San Francisco, my parents gave me some spending cash for the week, just in case we went out to eat or something like that anyway. I blew the entire bunch of money they gave me just to make sure I could purchase this game, which I did while I was there. So, yeah, there we go. There's my, that's my souvenir. And then we also had Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World. So then later on we had the Super Mario 1, 2, and 3 and the Lost World, the Lost Levels, unreleased in the US. It actually stamps it on this one. And then one of the other options is also Super Mario World. So, very cool. Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. I think most people just call it Yoshi's Island, but the official name is Super Mario World 2. Where you play as Yoshi with Baby Mario, which I thought was really cool. This game, I just loved how this game looked, how everything looked like it was like done with colored, the colored pencil or whatever that the style is there. Very, very cool game. The crying Baby Mario voice does grate on you. It's supposed to. That's the truth. We did get Super Mario Kart, and that's the one that took the world by storm. It's like, oh, it's a Mario game, but it's a racing game, and it's a go-kart, and you're going around, and you can play, two-player on it, and there's a battle mode, and there's items and, little weapon things that you could pick up to use to your advantage. This is the one that started it all. I love it. Still like playing it today. I remember when I first heard about Super Mario RPG, and I thought it was fake. Like, I thought it was like an EGM April Fool's joke. I legitimately thought that this was a prank. And then I learned it was legit, that they actually made a Mario RPG with help from Square. I was like, oh my god, that's the best collaboration of all time right there, right? It had that claymation look that Nintendo was really getting behind with the Donkey Kong countries and all that too. Super Mario RPG, still amazing. Super Metroid is a game I can go on and on and on about. I was thinking about it the other day because somebody emailed me saying, hey, just to let you know, I just beat Super Metroid for the first time. I was like, oh, congratulations. I was thinking about it. I was like, man, I don't think I've beaten Super Metroid in probably 25 years. It's time I revisit that. Very cool how it starts off with a boss battle, and then you have to race against the clock. You'll be able to do it the first time you play it. But very smart for this game to start where you left off in the NES version, to kind of refamiliarize yourself with this game. And such a great experience. It's one of the best games of all time, in my opinion. Super Ninja Boy is not one of my favorite games of all time, however, I'd love to talk about it. I do like Culture Brain and what they've done for their NES games. And this Super Nintendo one I was really excited to play, because I loved Kung Fu Heroes was a favorite of mine for the NES, for a few reasons. This one plays a little bit more like an RPG, like the Super Ninja Brothers that they had for the NES. But when you go into a fight scene, then it turns into that kind of Kung Fu Heroes a little bit way. But when it's missing that frame of animation, it's just kind of choppy and clunky, it kind of takes you out of it. And it's just like, it kind of makes you a little bit less interested to play this game even more. So, I mean, if you can find it for cheap, I mean, grab it for sure. I just wish there was more going on for it. But doesn't matter. It started with the word super, so we're adding it to the list. Super Nova is the next game on this list. You got a shooter here. I do love me some space shooters. And this one, well, I mean, there were better ones on the list. This one's actually pretty difficult, in my opinion. But, you choose which one of the 3 ships you want to start with. Make your way through. 1-hit kills, and then you will probably die mostly because enemies come from behind you and you don't see them until you blow up. So, there's that to contend with. We have Super Off-Road. You may have played Ivan Ironman Stewart's Super Off-Road, and this is Super Off-Road for the Super Nintendo. That's right, they had Super Off-Road for the NES, and now you have Super Off-Road for the Super Nintendo, and it plays, well, the same. Gotta love it. They did make another one, too. They had a Super Off-Road, the Baja. That's right, we're in the Baja now, just hanging out with Jesse Ventura. And this one is a different version of Super Off-Road. This one, it's actually like a, behind the view. It really is super off-road because well, I guess there's a road there. Wait a minute. Well, you can go off the road, I suppose, and crash into some trees. How about Super Pinball Behind the Mask? Well, you have a few different pinball tables you can play as. It is your classic video pinball. Little lackluster, but, good old video pinball. What are we going to do here? Football, huh? Hey, there we go. Super Play Action Football. There's another one for you. Super Play Action Football is another, well, football game using licensed teams, so you can play as your Seattle Seahawks if you wish. This was not the best time of era for the Seattle Seahawks, but you can play as them all the same, I suppose. Isometric on this one, which is kind of fun. Super Punch-Out, been a long time coming until we finally got this one. They loved me some Punch-Out. This is now Super Punch-Out, using some of the other Super Punch-Out characters in this one, so returning some favorites like Bald Bull, and then you have like Bear Hugger from the arcade version, and a couple other ones too, and other ones just for this game, so very well done. Love it. You do not play as Little Mac, but, you know, had a game called Super Putty that you play as this kind of ball of putty. You can jump, you can punch, you can turn into a puddle to absorb, I suppose. Here's Super Putty. Super R-Type, another great shooter I can get behind. I did love me some R-Type when it came out, so why not have Super R-Type? And you can shoot your gun, you can charge up your shot and everything too. Always been a fan of the R-Type games, and this one, it's a great one. Super RBI Baseball. We got another baseball game for you. Here's Super RBI Baseball. RBI Baseball, the series on the NES. There's 4 of them. And now we have the one for the Super Nintendo here. I'll add this one anyway. The Super Scope 6. It does start with the word Super. This is the Super Scope 6. This is the game that was basically your tech demo for your Super Scope, which was your light gun for the Super Nintendo. Instant headache if you look through the visor, at least it was with me, but you do not need to look through the visor to play this game. You can also just hold it Rambo style at your hip, which is usually how I played every Zapper game or every Super Scope game for the Super Nintendo when I had one of these devices. Actually, hold on, I still have one of these devices. I just never use it. It's in the closet somewhere. Super Slam Dunk. Well, here we go. We got a basketball game on the list, and as the court keeps, you know, twisting and turning and everything, Super Slam Dunk. That's just kind of an average basketball game. Super Slapshot. Is it just an average hockey game? Well, you play as different countries, not really specific teams. And I think there are better hockey games out there. We have Super Smash TV for your Super Nintendo. Don't get it twisted, it is just Smash TV, just on the Super Nintendo. But, you know, on the labels and lists and everything, they address it as Super Smash TV. Cool that they have, you know, Smash TV in the arcade is a twin-stick shooter. Nice that you had the 4 buttons on the Super Nintendo, so your D-pad is where you move, and then your A, B, X, Y buttons are to shoot those directions and everything. So it actually worked out pretty well for a game like this. Super Soccer, another great soccer game. This one is another one where you play as the different countries, and it is, again, it's a soccer game. It's actually kind of a decent soccer game as far as soccer games go, though. So if you're looking for like a pretty good soccer game for the Super Nintendo that's not going to break the bank, this one will definitely not break the bank. I promise you that. And then right next to that we have Super Soccer Champ. There's Super Soccer, and then we have Super Soccer Champ. This one's from Taito. And this one, instead of like scrolling up and down, this one scrolls left and right. So whatever your preferences are, well, there you go. Super Solitaire. Nope. Super Star Wars. Now, that's a game I can get behind. There was a few of them. We have Super Star Wars. This is the first one, of course. That's kind of started it all off. Plays Luke Skywalker here as you're going through. Played a lot of this one. I did play quite a bit of this one. Then a little bit later, I think the next year, we had Super Empire Strikes Back. This is my preferred one. This is my favorite one of the 3 of them. And me personally speaking, you start off with the lightsaber, and nice because you can just double jump and you're just slashing everything as you cut through. So makes it easier for me anyway. And then Super Return of the Jedi. Well, if you're doing the first 2, you gotta follow it up with Return of the Jedi. I didn't like the fact that it started off with a speeder level. I think that these always looked cool on the Super Nintendo, but no, just start off with like an action level. And then do this one like 2nd or 3rd stage or something like that, but yeah, there you go. We get Super Street Fighter II. Street Fighter II, S-tier game, even by today's standards, as far as a fighting game goes. And this one, Super Street Fighter II, introduces 4 new characters. This is where we finally get Cammy. I was a huge fan of DJ. I thought DJ was a really cool character. You know, some of the other characters can do different moves now too, which is kind of fun. Super Strike Eagle. It's a kind of a F-14 Tomcat flight sim thing. It's Top Gun. If they made a Super Top Gun, this is going to be Super Top Gun. There you go. Super Tennis. Believe it or not, if you grew up with the Super Nintendo, if you were around when the Super Nintendo was first released, there's a pretty good chance you may have played this game, because a lot of times when, especially back in the day when consoles were first released and there wasn't just a glut of new games that came out all at once, you just kind of played everything. There's like, well, I already have, you know, like Mario World and, you know, maybe a shooter or maybe something else and everything too, and you're just like, well, I've already kind of played everything and this is a new game, and, you know, sure, it's tennis, you know, I can't really go wrong with tennis. It's not terrible, it's just tennis. tennis. So, Super Tennis. Oh dear lord, Super Troll Islands. There was a game I played, Miner 2049er. Oh, and there's a game I played on the NES called City Connection. Both of them, the idea is you have to, you know, as you walk on the ground, or drive on the ground in City Connection's case, it fills in that area, it kind of paints it underneath you, and that's how you beat these stages. This game's like that too, where everything's black and white, but as you know, go up and down the ladders and walk on the ground and everything, even swim in the water, it brings color to life, and that's how you defeat these stages. Defeat these stages is probably not the right word. Trolls become repopularized about every 20 years or so. About every 20 years, the trolls come back in some form or fashion. Maybe even every 10 to 15 years. We're almost due. Almost due. We just had the Trolls movie a little bit ago. Give it another 10 years, 5 to 10 years, and Trolls will be back in some form or fashion. I promise you that. Super Turrican. Now, when you talk about those European style games that are usually like bright, colorful, fun, you know, everything. This game is like that too, but not as European-y as those other ones. But you could totally tell this game was made for like an Amiga computer or something. Super Turrican, this is kind of the gold standard when it comes to a run-and-gun game, where we would consider that maybe to be Contra. Other countries might consider it to be Turrican. Absolutely amazing on the Super Nintendo. Also got Super Turrican 2. That one came out a little bit later as well. Turrican 2, I think this one, I like this one more than the other one, but you know, both of them just fine. Super Valis IV, we're talking about now. Here's Super Valis IV. The Valis series has been around a while, so sometimes there's like, Super Valis IV, where's the first three? Well, they've been around for a while. They had Valis games on the TurboGrafx 16. They had Valis games on the Sega Genesis. They even had one on the Famicom that we didn't get here in the US, but still. So we'll get Super Valis 4, play as a lady, play as a woman, slashing a sword. You know, cool, just like a little run and slashy style. Super Widget. Now, Widget was like a Saturday morning cartoon in the early 90s. And again, in the early 90s, Saturday morning cartoons were kind of going by the wayside. Saturday morning cartoons were definitely more of a, I think, 70s and 80s thing. And now I grew up in the 80s, so I definitely remember that. And then into the 90s, they existed, but not in the same realm. Like, it wasn't like you knew which channel had what cartoons, and then after a while, when the cartoons turned into, like, you know, live action stuff, you knew that was about time to actually go outside and touch grass or something. But Super Widget, I remember it being a cartoon, never saw the cartoon, but I had it for the NES, and of course you also have it for the Super Nintendo. Little shape-shifting alien thing is what's going on here. You know, I also covered all of these Super Nintendo games via the year that they came out, so if you want to marathon that, just look at it. Here's a bunch of games that came out when the Super Nintendo launched. Here's a bunch of games came out the next year. Here's a bunch of more games that came out the year after that. You might find games you forgot about. You might find games you didn't even know existed.